those young hell-raising days wasn't no rule we didn't break. Just a couple of rowdy renegades when we blew it up.
Good morning. We're here today with Balukjian. He has a book that's out. It's a single unopened pack of 1986 Topps baseball cards. A vow to track down all the players inside, which is just an awesome idea. What could possibly go wrong? The premise of the book is he opened up a pack of baseball cards. I believe it was 11,341 mile road trip, Brad. Right, and definitely a lot learned along the way. I read the book. It is awesome. If you love baseball, it's awesome. I mean, if you just want to read a good book, it's awesome. Welcome, Brad. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks. And I appreciate you saying that about, if you just want to read a good book, because I always wanted to write something that was obviously baseball fans would enjoy, but that anyone could access and appreciate.
Absolutely. How did you come up with this idea?
So let's see. When I took the trip, it was 5 years ago, 2015. So I'm 39 now. I was 34 on the trip, and at that, in my mid 30s, still single, no kids. A lot of people, my friends, kind of settling down and having kids, getting married. And I thought about how I was now the same age as the baseball players that I grew up watching when they retired, right? So most athletes are kind of done in their mid 30s. And I grew up collecting baseball cards like so many people, buying all the wax packs and chewing the gum. And so I always wondered, like, what happened to the guys that I collected in the late 80s, mid 80s? That kind of where are they now question that I think a lot of people are interested in. And I thought, well, it'd be kind of neat as a device to get a pack, because that would give you, a pack of cards that had never been opened. And that would give you this like random sample of players from that era. And I could use that as the catalyst for going on this road trip to find them all. And then I could kind of explore this notion of like, okay, now that I'm in my mid 30s, asking these players as sort of my own kind of mentors, like, well, what did you do when you were in your mid 30s and you were at a crossroads, and you could not play baseball anymore? What did you do with the rest of your life?
That's a pretty big question for I'm sure any athlete in any sport. But so you were very lucky when you opened up that pack of cards, because you ended up with very interesting players.
And as I say in a footnote in the book, in full disclosure, I did open up a few different packs. I didn't mix the cards between packs, but I just knew if I opened just one pack and, half the guys are dead, or like everyone lives in the same state, that wouldn't make a very good road trip book. So
now I know trying to locate people, just for my podcast is very difficult. People don't want to talk to you. They're private. You have to go through many different chains just to try to get to somebody.
I've seen you've had some really great guests on your show. Like, so have you been rejected by people or had that awkward?
Yes. Yeah. It's interestingly enough, I've been rejected by people who you wouldn't have thought would have rejected me. Huh. And then the people who I thought maybe wouldn't speak to me were very gracious.
What was the reason they would give you when they would reject you?
I don't do interviews. And this was for somebody who obviously does interviews.
Right.
Too busy. Then I would follow back with everything going on right now. Everybody's stuck at home. So, I mean, how busy really is somebody? Right. But, I take it with a grain of salt, and I still get to talk to awesome people. So how were you able to, this is like a monumental task to find these players, and some of them were difficult, and we'll get into that. But how were you able to start? How did you start?
Yeah, so I had done like almost a year of research and prep. So let's take a couple examples. Like on the easy side, Rance Mullenix, I just Googled him, and it happens to be that he is a realtor now. And so if you've ever noticed, the easiest people's phone numbers to get in society are realtors, because their numbers are everywhere. So, on his Century 21 or whatever the company was, on his profile, he had his cell phone number right there, so I just gave him a call. Someone like Steve Yeager, I think Yeager, I had interviewed. So knowing I was going to do this, I wrote a shorter article for Smithsonian about stealing bases, and as a catcher, I got in touch with Steve Yeager. I don't know how I first got his number, maybe also through the public record searches. And I had interviewed him for that article, and then I knew in the back of my head, okay, I'm gonna later on I'm gonna follow up and ask if I could actually come visit him and do this project. So I was kind of being strategic about how to get to know these guys to kind of ramp up to my bigger ask. But now, of course, not all of them were willing to talk to me. I mean, as you see in the book, I think the failures are actually as interesting as the successes, because I get to have some fun with Carlton Fisk, and, Vince Coleman blows me off, but I still managed to go to where he grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and retrace his childhood. So, just because someone doesn't talk to you doesn't mean you can't write about them.
And that's what I love about the book. We're going to get into the players later, but the chapter about Carlton Fisk towards the end of the book, when I believe it was his publicist, reached out to you, is hilarious for me. I laughed last night when I was reading the book. We'll talk about that. How did you get
giving me a call soon again?
I was going to ask you that. How did you get involved in writing professionally?
Yeah, so I always have had a bit of an identity crisis, where I'm a scientist and also a writer, right? And they're kind of two different sides of your brain, and I can't commit fully to either one. Like, I love them both. In college, I studied journalism. I was lucky enough to have some great professors, and I trained in magazine journalism, which is almost like a lost art form now because there's so few magazines left that do this kind of long form style. But for me, like, my literary heroes were Hunter S. Thompson and Tom Wolfe and Gay Talese and all these people that, learned how to apply the techniques of fiction to nonfiction. And that's really what my book is creative nonfiction, right? So it's a true story, but I use a lot of the elements of a novel, like dialogue and description and all of that. I think it makes it a much more compelling read that way. So I had trained in that form, and then I worked for a magazine called Islands Magazine right after college. And then I decided I wanted to go back to the science a little more, so I got my PhD in environmental management. And then I said, okay, now I want to go back to the journalism. So I've always done some freelance writing, but I've never taken on a whole book before. But
you've written for some pretty well-known places, Rolling Stone, National Geographic, Los Angeles Times. That's pretty. It's a good list.
Yeah, I'd always done shorter stuff, but I think a lot of writers in the genre that I work in dream of being able to write a longer, go long essentially. And nowadays, you kind of have to write a book to do that. And so I was really just happy to finally get the space to practice the craft that I had trained on.
You're also a biology professor,
right?
Currently.
Yes.
So with the virus and everything that's going on right now, how has this just impacted, that aspect?
Yeah, no,
as well as now your book release.
Yeah, it's been all around. I mean, I think we're all just taking shots left and right here with this thing. So from teaching, it's really everything now is moving online, right? And I think it scares me, to be honest, because I don't really like online teaching. I just think there's something about you need to have that face-to-face experience to get the most out of the class. And so I understand we have to do that right now, but I really hope that, before too long, we can get back to a setting that's, the actual classroom. And then about the book, yeah, it's been disappointing. I mean, I had like a 35 to 40 stop book tour planned. I was going to, and I know you're in Pennsylvania. I was going to go to Scranton and Philadelphia, my book tour. And I put a lot of work into that, but, that's now canceled. And hopefully I'll get to do it down the line. But so, yeah, it's been rough. On the other hand, people are home more, perhaps have more time to read, need a good distraction. So maybe my book will provide some of that. But then again, on the other hand, people have less disposable income now because, the economy's really taking a hit. So there's all these
Well,
intersecting forces.
the book's very affordable. I grabbed it on my iPad on Apple. So I don't think that's an excuse for anybody. Everybody's home. It's a great book to read. I'm trying to plug this for you.
I appreciate it.
Brad's very active on social media, so we'll put up his links later. And you're putting out great content, and it's not just about the book; it's about baseball and some other things in there. So definitely worth hopping on. When did you realize that you were good at writing, and people wanted to read what you were doing?
I guess I always got, like, when I had a chance to write in this style, even all the way back in college, getting a lot of positive reinforcement from my professors. I knew I had a knack for it. And then I think the shorter pieces that I wrote were, I got good feedback, but they were not, when you only have like 1,000 words or 500 words, and just so people know for comparison, like my book is 90,000 words, so it's
Wow.
it's a long, it's by comparison, it's a lot. I didn't really have a chance to write at that length until now. I always believed that I could do it, but until you actually do it, you don't know for sure. So I think when I got feedback from when I was trying to sell the book, and I would go to agents, and they were giving me a lot of positive feedback, then I kind of knew, okay, this is going to be good enough to fly.
What is that process like for somebody who's never written a book? Is it scary?
Yeah, it's
Daunting?
so the reason why it took so long for this book to come out, because I took the trip in 2015, is basically because that process is so daunting. So I took the trip without having any kind of a book deal or advance. I mean, I had to fund everything myself. It was difficult. It was expensive. And then I came back and I wrote a proposal, which was like, I mean, so in nonfiction, you don't have to write the whole book before you try to get a book deal. If you write a novel, you have to write the whole book first, which is, a lot of work up front. In nonfiction, you can sell a book based on the proposal, but even the proposal is a huge commitment. So my proposal was like 127 pages, and it had sample chapters, and it had an outline of all the chapters, and you use that to try to get an agent, and then the agent tries to sell it to the publisher. And basically there's 5 companies that are all in New York that control all publishing. Major publishing. And so they're called the Big Five. It's like Penguin, Random House, Simon and Schuster, the names you've probably heard of. And your agent tries to sell the book to an editor at one of those publishers. And so we did that, and it was really demoralizing because it was rejection after rejection after rejection. And I was being told that it was a great idea and it was great writing, but I didn't have 100,000 Twitter followers, and therefore, I didn't have a platform. I wasn't famous. I didn't have a brand. So basically they say, well, we can't offer you a deal because we don't think we can sell enough to justify it. And, it's really disappointing because it's saying, like, there's no room to take a chance on an unknown author, right? So at that point I was like, well, do I give up or what? And I ended up going to a much smaller press, University of Nebraska, who does a lot of baseball books, and they were great. They immediately were interested. I got a very, very tiny advance for the book. So financially it's difficult, and hopefully if the book does well, I can, make some actual money on the royalties. But yeah, it was a long, drawn out process.
I kind of shrugged my shoulders there because we hear that a lot. I think a lot of companies are short-sighted, and they all look for how many YouTube views do you have and Twitter followers, and they're missing the boat on some very interesting people and content that maybe not a lot of people have seen yet.
Yeah.
So we've experienced that on our end. So do you think if you would have came up with the idea now, now that the baseball's on hold and sports are on hold, you would have had a little more difficulty getting the book greenlit?
Yeah, right now is so weird. I mean, I'm really concerned about publishing and journalism in general right now because I mean, I'm already reading about all these layoffs that are happening. You would think that without any actual baseball games, it would be maybe easier to get coverage or to write about this stuff. But I'm finding that a lot of newsrooms and publishing outlets are kind of in this state of flux, and they're not really doing as much. They're trying to figure out what the future holds. So I don't know. I think it would be really hard to sell a book right now. But I'm not trying to do it, so I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. So the list, let's get into the book. Like I said before we were recording, you can tell us as much as you want,
Yeah.
or as little as you want if you want people to be a little surprised when they read it. So you've met with the list is Al Cohen's, Carlton Fisk, obviously everybody knows Carlton Fisk, Don Carmen, Doc Gooden, Gary Templeton, Gary Pettis, Jamie Cockenour, Lee Mazzilli, who is my favorite player. I was
Nice.
super stoked to see him in the book. Randy Reddy, Richie Hebner, Rick Sutcliffe, I'm sorry, Steve Yeager, and Vince Coleman, who turns out to be a little difficult for you.
Yeah.
Your first person was Rance Mullenix, and you said he was easy to find. You Googled him, which is awesome. How did you go about finding everybody else past that?
Okay. So Templeton, I think so. There are these like public records databases that you can subscribe, you can pay for, where you get people's addresses and phone numbers. So I could get their addresses pretty easily, and I wrote snail mail letters to each of them, kind of introducing myself. And I don't think anyone directly responded to that, but I didn't even expect them to. I just wanted to give them some context because I knew I would be following up. And then like Gary Templeton, I think there were a bunch of phone numbers, and I ended up like getting his daughter, I think it was, on the phone or on texting or something. And she's like, "Oh, this Gary doesn't live. This isn't Gary, but I'm his daughter. Or here's his number." So, some serendipity like that. But yeah, it was a mix of basically just anytime you're doing kind of this kind of journalism, it's going to require using all possible research angles and talking to different people, and it's a mix of serendipity and hustle, and whether or not it works out.
And you did this all yourself. There was no
right.
There's no team behind you.
No, I didn't have, like I said, the whole thing was by myself. I didn't have, any real help there.
And trust me, guys, this is difficult. So just trying to find guests for here is super difficult. You have to turn every stone over and try to find every contact.
And again, to do this, I teach part time. For 5 years, I live in the Bay Area and the California, and basically teaching part time, making $30,000 a year in the Bay Area, which is nothing. I mean, just scraping by, renting a room in a house so I could do this, right? So I made it. There are major trade-offs. Again, being single, not having kids, like it makes it easier to do that kind of thing. But I also just had to live very simply and but I knew I wanted to give myself a chance to succeed, and the only way to do that would be to give myself enough time to work on the book.
What were your expectations before you embarked on these trips?
I had no idea whether. The biggest fear I had was like getting the players to participate, right? But then before I took the trip, most of them I had gotten in touch with, and I felt, okay, I'm at least going to get a shot to talk to these guys. I didn't know necessarily all the themes that were going to come out until I talked to them, and I was really pleasantly surprised by how many different threads are in the book. So there's the thread about the father-son relationship, and I didn't even know that was going to be there, but I was really surprised by how many of these guys, first of all, that they were willing to open up and kind of be vulnerable enough to talk about it. But then, Rick Sutcliffe talking about his father abandoning the family. Don Carmen talking about his father, how he kind of how he abused him and how difficult that was. Randy Reddy talking about his father dying when he was, a teenager. So it's like you have some of these really poignant, sad stories, but then you got a counterweight. Lee Mazzilli has this beautiful relationship with his father, and I talk about my own father is in the book, and he goes on the road with me for a little bit. So there was that thread. There was the thread of kind of the tortoise and the hare of like the guys that were the least accomplished in baseball, like Jaime Kokenauer, end up being probably the most well-adjusted after they're done playing. But I didn't know all those things until I was actually on the road meeting with guys.
Why do you think they opened up so much to you? I mean, it starts right away, with Rance Mullenix.
Right. Talking about like getting married, right? And yeah. I think it was a combination of things. I think what I would do is like I would take, let's see, I have one. Actually, one sec, I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
So this, it says Yeager.
Yep.
This was my file on Steve Yeager, with all these articles about his career. And so when I would meet with him, when I met with him, I put this in front of him and I said, "This is your file. I've read all of this and I feel like I know nothing about you." And I think that kind of set the tone that like this wasn't going to be a typical sports book, or I wasn't really going to ask about. Because the obvious things to ask Steve Yeager are, well, tell me about what it felt like to be the World Series MVP in 1981, right? But he's been asked that a billion times, so he's got prepared answers basically. But when I asked him about like, well, tell me about what your father did for a living, right? That opened up a dialogue that eventually led to, actually, my father was drunk all the time and he passed out in the clubhouse when I was playing in Cincinnati. I doubt he woke up that morning thinking he was going to talk about his drunk father to me. But if you set up your line of questioning in a certain way, and I think if you I tried to be honest and open and talk about myself also and say like, hey, I'm not a sports writer. I'm just, a fan who's also a journalist who's really interested in these deeper issues around baseball and life after baseball. I think that they respected what I was trying to do and were willing to share a little bit.
Were they guarded at first, wondering if you had an ulterior motive?
Yeah, I'm sure a little bit, but I also told them like, I said right off the bat, look, like I know you're trained to talk in cliches. Like I get it. Like you're gonna, your whole life you've been saying like, yeah, I'm gonna give 110%, and tomorrow's another day. And I was like, basically said like, if you're gonna use that, if we're gonna do that, I'm not I'm not interested in having that conversation. So if you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. But I think that they just appreciated me being forthcoming and forthright about that.
All right, can we just go down the list and maybe play the name game and give me some thoughts on each player or ones we can talk about? Rance Mullenix was your first trip. Before the trip, were you nervous? It was your first one. You're heading out. You don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I was. The first one, is always sort of like, getting over that hump. But he was very, when I look back, like Rance was a great way to start because he was so measured, and so he's kind of like the ultimate, if you think of like a comedy, the straight guy, the straight edge guy, just kind of like down to earth, really honest, but not a character per se. And I think that kind of created this nice start to the book that then, and then I talk about, because I'm in the book myself, and like that first chapter, I'm like, I get drunk and I pass out on the side of the freeway, and like I'm kind of a mess, right? And there's this guy that's sort of, he's this like nice, beautiful family man, and I'm kind of out of control. So it kind of created a nice juxtaposition there, and maybe set up a nice kind of like foil for the rest of what was going to come later.
What was your takeaway with Rance?
Rants that he, first of all, like on the father thing, had a great relationship with his father, um, and that I was impressed by how he was willing to open up about his own mistakes, right? So he talks about like he loved baseball, but he also recognizes the toll that it took on his first marriage. And he has that line where he says like, "You can be home and still be a mile away," like.
Mm.
And but he kind of like it's like his story is like a story of second chances. Like he got married again, they had kids, and I feel like the father that he is the second time around is very different from the first time.
How about Steve Yeager?
Yeager was a very, I expected him to be this sort of brash, cocky kind of guy, and he is. But at the same time, like, what was nice there was that he, again, pretty quickly was willing to let me in a little bit and talk about his father and what that relationship was like. And then the next day I got to meet his son. So it was really nice to see, to interview father and son and to contrast their closeness with the relationship that Steve didn't have with his father.
Now, Gary Templeton, obviously he was traded for Ozzie Smith along the way. And when I think about Gary Templeton, I think, moody, grumpy. What was your experience?
Yeah, so that was kind of, as I say in the book, what I expected also. And you'll see in the book, it's anything but that, right? So we watch kung fu movies together, hang out in his living room. I interviewed his wife. He was one of the most open, friendly guys in the book.
Gary Pettis, I thought was very interesting, although you didn't get a chance to talk to him.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's not a spoiler.
Yeah.
He was in the middle of a baseball season, and I believe you said they had a gag order coming from the manager,
Yeah.
not to talk to anybody. What was that situation like for you, trying to get a hold of him?
Yeah, well, I liked the Pettis thing because I teach at a place called Merritt College now, but I was teaching at another school in Oakland called Laney College when I wrote the book when I took the trip, and Gary went to Laney College. So I had this instant connection. He grew up in Oakland. He went to the college that I taught at. I actually went into the archives and found an old college newspaper of him from like 1979, an old article. So I kind of knew where he came from. I teach a lot of the students that he once was. And I was really excited to share that. And I tried to, when I end up not being able to talk to him, that chapter ends with the letter or I guess a letter that captures what I would have said to him. And I thought that was kind of a new way to approach writing about him without having talked to him.
Same with Vince Coleman. He was another just elusive person for you.
But with Vince, I feel like, I got a hold of Vince Coleman before the trip, and he just flat out said no. Whereas Gary, it was beyond Gary Pettis's control.
Was there anything beyond a no, or it was just forget it?
No, it was funny. He was like, no, and then I'm not interested. And then I said, I kind of gave one follow up, and he's like, Brad, I told you I'm not interested. And I was like, all right, well, that's that.
It's tough. So I'm from the Eastern Pennsylvania area, which is Phillies territory, although I'm a Mets fan. So Don Carmen, I remember him. He was around at the game, played for the Phillies, and I thought it was a great story about him. Could you tell us about Don Carmen?
Yeah, and he was my favorite player as a kid. He was my hero as a kid. So that was by far the most special of the whole pack, was, getting to actually meet my childhood hero. And then they say, never meet your hero because, they're going to let you down. And this was, he actually exceeded my expectations. Just an amazing guy. Super, just different, like definitely the most intellectual, kind of thoughtful guy in the pack. Baseball players aren't known for being intellectuals, but he's a completely different type of cat. I could see him being in one of my grad school classes. That's the kind of guy he is.
And he's an agent.
No, he's a psychologist. He got his master's in psychology and now working on his doctorate. He's the psychologist for Scott Boras, who's yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's a great going from a professional baseball player to a psychologist. That's a whole nother.
Right, but he's actually this like so. What he does is like all of Scott Boras's clients, like Bryce Harper and all those guys, when they go in a slump, Don Carmen flies to wherever they are and talks to them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now my hero growing up was Lee Mazzilli, so it's interesting you have yours and you also did mine, which I appreciate. I loved Lee Mazzilli. He came out. He was a great-looking Italian guy, young kid. He was supposed to be the next superstar for the Mets. It didn't really turn out that way, although he was still a very good utility baseball player and helped the 1986 Mets win their championship series. He seemed like a really great guy in the book. What were your experiences with him?
What I was most impressed with there was his relationship with his brother. You know, he talks about his older brother that passed away from cancer, and again, his willingness to open up and talk about how, you know, he talked to, I mean, you could tell like his brother was his best friend. It's like, I don't know, right now I'm watching, you know, the daily press coverage of from Andrew Cuomo on TV from New York, the governor, and and his relationship with his brother, Chris Cuomo. And they're you know, it's this wonderful thing. They're so close to each other, and that's the kind of relationship that clearly Lee Mazzilli had with his brother.
One disappointment was Doc Gooden. Obviously, I'm a Mets fan, another hero of mine growing up. Could you kind of briefly explain what happened there?
Yeah, well, Doc was the one guy who wanted me to pay him. He wanted $500 to interview him, and I said, well, I'm not a big fan of that idea, but I'll do it as long as like I'm going to talk about it in the book. You know, I'm not going to hide that. And yeah, very sad because at that point he had been clean for like 3 years or something, and I was in his living room for our appointment and talking to his son, his oldest son, and he completely no-showed. And no one knew where he was, including his son. And so that was, you know, another very sad chapter in Doc's struggle with addiction.
And that was it. Obviously no other contact. And
yeah, that chapter is about, you know, basically him not showing up, you know.
The one we talked about before, Carlton Fisk. So I really knew nothing about him the way that he portrayed himself, as far as not wanting to talk about himself. Could you explain Carlton Fisk and then tell us the story at the end about the publicist?
Yeah, so I tried to give some context. I mean, Carlton Fisk notoriously, he doesn't talk to really the press very much. I mean, turned down Bob Costas, which, you know, that's you're going to Bob Costas, like, you're not going to talk to me. So I didn't expect him to talk to me. But I tried to provide a little context by talking about his relationship with his father. And there's that story in the book about, you know, his Hall of Fame speech where you can just see how, or I guess the most telling thing is there's a story from when Fisk was I think it was in high school, and he loved basketball. He was a basketball star, maybe more so than baseball even. And he was in like, I think it was the state championship, and he scored like 45 points or something. And I think his team lost, and he had this great game, even though they lost. And I guess right after the game, the first thing his father says to him is, "You missed 3 free throws," or something like that. And it's like, wow, okay, that. So you can kind of tell maybe some of Fisk's psychology or his psyche, how much that was affected from just so early on. Just goes to show you how important parenting is and childhood and all that. Anyway, so yeah, with Fisk, he wouldn't talk to me. So I found out from a source that he golfs at this really exclusive private resort in Florida. A lot of days. And so I had fun with that chapter. I pretended like I was a millionaire home buyer to sneak onto the golf course to ambush him. And so that chapter is about that whole scheme that I cooked up. And then it ends up not being there. So 2 weeks later, I go to Cooperstown, New York, and I track him down. He's signing autographs. So I pay to get his autograph. And I won't tell the whole story, but I get to meet him, and I have some fun with it, and then I get a very kind of angry call from his agent the next day, and it's yeah, it's best to read that one for yourself, I think.
I believe it. I think that's worth buying the book just to read that chapter. It just kind of gives you an inside look at publicists and people who don't want to talk to you. And for those who don't know, the Hall of Fame, you can go to the Hall of Fame inductions every year. I used to go every summer. And the players will be either lined up on the street or inside stores, and they're charging. I don't know. I'm not begrudging them at all. Anywhere from, when I went, it used to be anywhere from $20 up to, $150 just for a quick 5-second signature.
Yeah.
And I'm sure those prices went up from there. But a good place to meet people.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you most proud about in the book?
I'd say I'm most proud that I got to write the book I wanted to write, which was, again, something that I see the take-home messages of the book providing some good advice for living your life. Not just about baseball, but some of the notion that you can only control what first of all, you can only control your behavior. We all have thoughts and feelings that we pop into our heads, and you can't control what pops into your head, but you can control your reaction to it. You're always in control of your behavior, and how important it is to be in the present moment, to not live in fear, to not let fear get the best of you. I chose that quote. I had the book right here. The opening quote from Helen Keller, which to me summarizes the book, which is, "Security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is a daring adventure or nothing." And I think that kind of captures the spirit of what I was trying to do.
That's a great quote. How did Don Carmen become your favorite baseball player?
Well, I was a Phillies fan growing up, so he played for the Phillies. But then beyond that, I didn't know. Otherwise, I liked the guys that were kind of the journeyman players, the underdogs. But I never really, I always wondered about that. And then again, I'm not, as a scientist, I'm not prone to say it was meant to be. But I kind of, after meeting him and seeing how many similarities I share with him, I talk about how I was bullied as a kid and kind of picked on, and he had the same experience. There's all these weird parallels, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe that was just meant to be. I was meant to have him as my favorite.
Was he your favorite person you met?
Yeah, for sure. But I also someone like Randy Reddy is so fun. In terms of just wanting to hang out, someone like Randy Reddy would be maybe my first choice just to have a beer with.
Do you think, if everything goes well, have you thought about branching off to another year, another follow-up?
No, not because I wouldn't enjoy it, but I just feel like the novelty, whatever I would do next in this vein I just don't think it could measure up. I hope other people do. I would love to, the nicest thing about this has been, I feel like it's something that a lot of people relate to, and it's been fun for me to meet other people that get excited by this idea. So I'd say, yeah, I would love to read someone else's book about another sport, another year. You could definitely do this in many different ways.
And I think it's available to so many different types of people. You have baseball card collectors. You have father and son relationships in the book. You have baseball, sports. You have drinking, which is fun. So it's really a great book. I read it. I read it in the last 2 days. Could you tell me, I'm just curious why. So the book was on pre-order, and maybe you can't answer this. Mm-hmm. I'm waiting, but now other people had availability to it. that it was released a little earlier.
Yeah, I have no idea. Like I was told from the very beginning, April 1st is the release day, and then they start shipping it so the publisher starts shipping their copies early if you order directly from the publisher. Amazon started shipping their copies early. I have no idea. It's very strange to me.
I was just wondering how the book business went.
Yeah.
But it's a nice, easy read, which is important to me.
Yeah.
I loved it. I
Great.
definitely highly recommend it. Where can we find you?
Yeah, so if you go to waxpackbook.com, that's the website. I'm on Twitter at waxpackbook. And I noticed like on Amazon, they have this, major delay, like a month, maybe 3-week delay to get the book because of the pandemic, and they're prioritizing essential items. So I encourage people to go to, I think it's indiebound.org, which is like a group of independent bookstores, and you can order it there and get it faster. And I'm really concerned about independent local bookstores right now with this whole pandemic. So it'd be great to support them.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I mean, definitely, again, go out and get the book, and we'll put all your links up so people can find it.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Ryan. It's
absolutely, Brad.
Always fun to talk to a fellow fan of this era.
You got it. Hopefully we'll talk again.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.